All right, well, it is official. These two are not going to be meeting with each other after all. They did met when he was running for president as Donald Trump, but the Mexican president and the American president are just saying tensions are such and the wall and the cost of it, who's going to pay for it is such. Best not to happen now. Dios mío. All right, Trish Regan to you.
Dios mío, indeed. Well, he's keeping his leverage, keeping the powder dry. We'll see what happens next. Neil, thank you so much. President Donald Trump, everyone, wrapping up his remarks at the GOP gathering in Philadelphia, where he blasted Mexico, saying he and Mexico have agreed to cancel their meeting. And he says he's going his own way. Any minute from now, Vice President Mike Pence is going to be addressing the Republican lawmakers, and we'll bring you that just as soon as it happens. I'm Trish Regan. You're watching the Intelligence Report, everyone. So again, President Trump here, there in Philadelphia, doubling down on his vow to build a wall and to crack down on sanctuary cities. He says Mexico's going to pay for that wall. We got a lot to cover here. Listen to him.
From day one, I've said it, and I mean the immediate removal of criminal aliens. They're going to be gone fast. And finally, at long last, cracking down on sanctuary cities. It's time to restore the civil rights of Americans, to protect their jobs, their hopes, and their dreams for a much better future. The President of Mexico and myself have agreed to cancel our planned meeting scheduled for next week. Unless Mexico is going to treat the United States fairly, with respect, such a meeting would be fruitless, and I want to go a different route.
All right, you heard it. He says Mexico's got to treat us fairly, and unless they do, then he's just going to go another route. He keeps insisting as well that Mexico's going to pay for all of this. So I want to go to my panel right now. I have with me Ford O'Connell and Capri Cafaro. Ford, what does he mean exactly when he says he wants to go a different route?
Well, Donald Trump's right. He's basically saying that if America can't control its borders, it can't control its destiny. And the southern border where I grew up is really a national security threat and a threat to the American worker. And let me tell you something.
I hear you on all this, but I'm just trying to understand what he's saying here when he says he's going to go a different route. So he's not going to meet with the president of Mexico. He insists Mexico's got to pay for this thing. He insists it's got to get built and says he's just signed an order that would initiate construction on it. So when he says different route, what does that mean? He's not going to talk to them as much. He's going to use more leverage in the way of trade agreements.
He's going to use more leverage. This is a negotiating tactic from Donald Trump, straight out of The Art of the Deal. And he has the leverage for two reasons. First, basically, manufactured goods are the #1 export in Mexico, and that is the #1 portion of their GDP, as well as remittances. So basically, America is 2 out of 4 of Mexico's GDP. And right now, Donald Trump has all the leverage, and he has to find a way to bring Mexico to the table, because security between the two countries is paramount, not only for the American worker, but also for our national security.
You know, Capri, I've spent a lot of time studying all the economies there in Latin America. In fact, at one point, had a job looking at all these countries in Latin America and their sovereign debt there. And I can tell you, Mexico is extraordinarily tied to the United States of America. And they go whichever way we go because of this tie. So when you think about it, Ford's making a really valid point here. It seems as though we're the ones with all the leverage in the world. And if we can exploit that, if we can use that, if he uses that properly to his advantage, then I don't know as Mexico's going to have a choice but to figure out some kind of way to pay for it.
Well, look, I mean, if the United States didn't have the leverage in this relationship, then we're doing something significantly wrong. I mean, we are, the economic giant of the world, and certainly within our hemisphere. And so I think that particularly when it comes to remittances, I think this is a really interesting area that, they might be able to, the United States has some jurisdiction there to say, look, if Mexican nationals are sending this money back, we're going to tax it. We're going to make sure that we get our fair share back. And obviously, as Ford said, that's a huge part.
One of the problems with remittances is that, yes, that's a huge, huge source of income for for Mexico.
For Mexico.
And a lot of that income is income that's under the table here that hasn't been taxed in the first place.
And that's exactly why it needs to be taxed. And let me say something else about this, Trish. One interesting thing about this that nobody ever talks about when we talk about undocumented workers and the fact that people get paid under the table. You want to talk about Social Security solvency or Medicare solvency. If you're not paying withholding taxes, this is another interesting way not to get off the wall. And so maybe we could use some of this to pay for the wall, but we also need to look at how can we utilize and tax some of this work that is not subject to withholding tax currently, and how does that play into the balance?
Well, maybe this
for
goes
Social Security
to,
and Medicare.
You got to figure out who the heck's in the country to begin with, right? Because you get people here that are working here that are, doing everything under the table. So he needs to know who's actually here. He's made it clear he's going to go after every single one of them that's a criminal that has committed some kind of crime in the United States of America and wants them out of here. One of the points he made as well, Ford, which was interesting, and we're going to talk about this a little bit later. One of our reporters has a story on this in the show. He talked about the inability and unwillingness of countries to take back their criminals in the first place. In other words, there's a lot of ground that needs to be covered, and he's putting it out there and saying, and this is an example of that, saying, look, all you other countries around the world, you need to start listening to us. We're going to play hardball in a way like you never seen before.
Well, exactly. Other countries don't want to take back the worst of the worst for all the shellacking that Donald Trump took in the media when he came down that golden escalator and talked about the worst of the worst. He's absolutely right. I mean, we've seen this with Haiti. We've seen these with major countries all over the world. And the bottom line is if they're not going to take them back, why the heck are we housing them? And why is the Democratic Party playing identity politics above all else in this situation and not putting Americans first? It's a very open and honest question, because when you look at this, Trish, when it comes to basically undocumented immigrants in the country, we've had a decrease in the number of deportations, and now the only people who basically get thrown out of the country are those who are priority one offenders, which means they've either committed 3 misdemeanors or killed someone. This is absolutely crazy. And when basically Donald Trump is not only telling the Republicans today that in Congress that there's a new sheriff in town and that this is his party and not the party of Reagan and not the party of Paul Ryan, but he's also signaling to the rest of the world that you're going to buck up and pull your part, because if you don't, the United States isn't going to do business with you.
Yep.
How do you think the rest of the world is reacting right now to this Capri? I mean, we've seen some of the headlines. It's clear that some folks like Angela Merkel over there in Germany are not too thrilled, but just all around the world right now, realizing that they don't have a guy there that's just going to do things the way they want and the way they were used to.
That's right. And I think we're seeing that, all across the globe, whether it is members of the European Union, members of the, Asian and Pacific alliances, Central and South America, all across the globe. I think that, people are really watching, with great intent and a little bit of, I think, trepidation, which, is good and it's bad, frankly. I mean, but Donald Trump is doing exactly what he said he was going to do. He said he wanted to be unpredictable. He is unpredictable. This is way more than just a change of the guard or a change of political party in the White House. This is a systemic shift in the way that the United States is doing business, both
really
domestically and internationally. And
incredible,
it is
incredible watch. Hey, I'm going to see you guys in a little bit, so don't go anywhere. Stay tuned. More Ford and Capri coming up.